This is Living for the City, and I'm Michael G. Haskins. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Project 2025, a coordinated plan to reshape the federal government and redefine American life from the ground up. Joining us is Wayne Besen, Executive Director of Truth Wins Out, whose new 500-page report, Behind the Mask, profiles 60 of the 114 organizations driving this agenda. The report exposes how these groups are working to roll back LGBTQ rights, restrict reproductive freedom, and replace secular democracy with a Christian nationalist vision, not just through policy, but by embedding loyal operatives deep inside government and media. We're going to break this down and what's really behind this movement, how it's spreading, and what we can do to push back. Wayne Besen, thank you for joining us here on Living for the City.
Great to be on. Thank you very much.
All right, great to have you with us. Wayne, let's start by having you situate the report first. Briefly summarize the purpose behind Behind the Mask and what led Truth Out to undertake this project.
I've been following the religious right for decades, going to their conferences, reading their books. I know some of the people involved in it. And when I read Project 2025, as scary as it was, I realized that it was scrubbed a little bit, that it wasn't as serious and scary as the organizations behind Project 2025. So what Behind the Mask, Truth Wins Out's report wanted the Americans to know was, as radical as Project 2025 is, it was whitewashed, and it's actually much worse. What we have are the 114 advisory board organizations behind Project 2025 want to remake America into a country we don't recognize. They want to disfigure our democracy. They don't believe in democracy. They want to go back at a bare minimum to the 1950s, where women didn't work and were forced to in menial jobs. LGBTQ people, they want them back in the closet. And you can go on, but this is a very different vision of America, and people need to realize how radical and extreme this project and the organizations behind it are.
And this is 60 of 114. What do they reveal about 2025, Project 2025's inner workings? Is there anything that you've taken from this?
Yes. First of all, this is a well-oiled machine with incredible funding. Mm-hmm. The organizations, remember, only 114, they're worth $1.4 billion annually in terms of revenue. Mm-hmm. And if you throw in the universities, it's $3.3 billion. So their money is no object for these organizations. It's a strange coalition. You have, on one hand, you have the Project 2025 fundamentalists. It's kind of a mix of evangelical Christianity and Opus Dei Catholics. But you also have involved in the mix some of the Peter Thiel, Elon Musk crowd from Silicon Valley that wants a red Caesar. They want a sort of a technocratic dictator. And then you have Donald Trump as well, who's his own orbit and just doesn't believe much in democracy and wants to be king. And so you have these three kind of competing power centers, but they come together, and what they don't all believe in is they don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in America as we know it. And there's an incredible amount of money and power behind this. And that's what people have to understand, that will not stop until they are stopped. And we see that right now with what's happening in Washington, whether it's the government shutdown and Project 2025's Russell Vogt, a key player behind that, who's the director of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. And so Project 2025 is involved in many different things we've seen so far. The Jimmy Kimmel, when he was briefly fired, that was Project 2025. Brendan Carr from the Federal Communications Commission, he wrote a chapter in Project 2025, and he's the one who got Jimmy Kimmel fired. I think that is a lot of people woke up to what was happening with Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, there's some of the other things are more obscure, like the purge of the federal government of workers, only to be replaced, by the way, later with a surge of Project 2025 people, is what we're seeing.
But Jimmy
Wayne,
Kimmel, how can that be?
Whoa, yeah,
I'm just saying.
But Jimmy Kimmel, they woke up. And, they saw. Yeah, they saw that these people want to actually, they don't like a comedian. They want to take them off the air. This is how serious this is.
Right. It just struck me that some of the other things that were happening beyond what you've just outlined were kind of obscure. The firing of the federal workers en masse. It doesn't seem like it was obscure to me, but apparently that's how they felt about it, in a way.
Yeah, because it was very easy for them to go in and say, well, these people were just waste. We're draining the swamp. But what's really happening, and this is what people need to understand, is that Project 2025 has a resume database. They've been collecting for a couple of years fundamentalists who they want to put in these positions of power. And so all these experts we have in government and things that shouldn't even, they're just bureaucratic jobs that shouldn't have ideology involved. They're replacing experts with their own extremists. So if they do try to take over this country, there's nothing but a bunch of yes men and women in place all throughout the government. In fact, they have the Project 2025 has their own spies that work in the federal government that report on people within the federal government who should be fired. They're their own moles. I mean, that was one thing we found in our report. That's
exactly taking me to where I wanted to go next. Wayne Besen. One of the claims in your report is that Project 2025 is not just about policy proposals, but personnel, preparing to place supporters into agencies, civil service, education, etc. Can you talk a little bit? You started to, and I interrupted you. Talk about that, please.
Sure. One organization called Feds for Freedom, which is on the advisory board, they're the ones who have moles within the federal government, and they wrote, they want people to get involved at the agency level, working groups to, fire figure out who the bad actors are so they can be fired. I would, since this is such a evangelical fundamentalist Christian influence document, Project 2025 with these organizations, a lot of it has to do with the seven mountains, which is Pentecostals. They want to take over what they call the seven mountains, the seven mountains of society, and that includes things like the seven mountains are family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government. Those are what they call the mountains, and they want to infiltrate all of these sectors of society with their own people, and that's why they've been collecting these resumes for Project 2025, so they can get into family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government. And what happened with Jimmy Kimmel was a part of that. That was entertainment. They tried to take it over. What we see with the attacks on the media, that is media and entertainment. And so we see this infiltration of their own people, putting them in place in all of these areas. But I think it was very much influenced by the Seven Mountains Mandate, which is a Pentecostal effort to take over society surreptitiously. Although it's not so surreptitious anymore. It's quite out in the open, which is scary.
Yeah. Wayne Besen, how does this kind of penetration, if you will, into government structures, how does it differ from previous conservative policy campaigns or think tank efforts. I mean, we've been hearing, I know you have, and many of our listeners have been hearing about some form, some organizations over the years, over the many, many years. How does what's happening right now, differ from those previous decades now, really?
It's much more extensive than it ever was. It's thought through. Every single granular level that have thought through how to do this. And this happened after Donald Trump had the January 6th insurrection. And he tried to stay in office, and it didn't work. Donald Trump was also frustrated because he kept running against people who stood up for the Constitution, who stood for the rule of law. And so this movement said, okay, we were thwarted during Donald Trump's first term. If we get a second chance, we need to think through every single possibility and anticipate it so we can get our own people in there. So next time Donald Trump says we want to do X, there's nobody to say, well, no, we can't do that. There's the rule of law. We can't do that. It's unconstitutional. And so I think what's different this time is how thorough this is, and how they've collected these resumes and they've vetted for their own people, and how they are actively firing experts and replacing them with extremists who have, in many cases, have very little expertise in the fields they're involved in.
Very little, yes.
Right, which I think is going to be a weakness of, and maybe their downfall in the end, because the incompetence level, people are going to notice after a while. I'll take, for example, Social Security. They have made it very difficult with Social Security. So you have to wait in huge lines.
Yes, you do.
Help.
Yeah.
Or they have senior citizens who need to navigate complicated online experiences, or wait on the phone for hours. And that's just one example. You have people in who work for Social Security who are, one of them said in the Washington Post that they're all taking medication because there's so much anxiety and stress. We had another article, I believe it was in the Times, where the people who work at Social Security were crying at their desks on a daily basis because of what's happening, because they're so overworked, because they're trying to gut the agency. But I do, and whether it's air traffic control, whether it's the weather service, you can't keep getting rid of expertise without it finally catching up. And I think that might be the Achilles heel of Project 2025 is the American people are going to notice when America no longer works, when everything fails. Our government services are fourth rate at best.
Well, I think some of the American people now are noticing. I think the larger question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Perhaps some of what took place yesterday is a partial answer. We shall see. Only time will tell. I'm speaking with Wayne Besen, the executive director of Truth Wins Out, and his new 500-page report, Behind the Mask, profiles 60 of the 114 organizations that are behind the curtain of Project 2025. Wayne, one of the themes, a recurring theme actually, and you mentioned it a couple of times thus far in the report, is this Christian nationalism, the belief that America is fundamentally a Christian nation, and that law, public policy, civic institutions should reflect that. Can you outline how this belief appears across these organizations, and if you can, specify if we have time?
Sure. Project 2025 and the 114 organizations do not believe in separation of church and state. They explicitly say that this is a Christian nation. And how is this going to act out in policy? Well, they want monuments built to Christianity that are very open. They want proselytizing where you can't do anything about it. They want educational material reflecting this. In fact, I'll give you an example, a concrete example. Linda McMahon at the Education Department just created a civics program to teach American kids civics. And 20 and their partners, 20 of them are Project 2025 organizations that do not believe in the separation of church and state. They they believe that this again is a Christian nation. They believe that there's two sets of laws really, that fundamentalist Christians can do whatever they want based upon what they call religious freedom, and everybody else has to follow the law. It is something that is robust. It is throughout the entire document. Organizations that you wouldn't think have anything to do with separation of church and state also talk about that they don't believe in it. And this goes with this has a number of sub-beliefs within this as well that are taken. For example, they have white supremacists within that organization, such as the Bull Moose Project, that they have. They believe, based upon their religious beliefs, that women should not be recruited into jobs such as doctors, lawyers, engineering, and should be taught homemaking. Wow. This is part of their belief system, and that also goes back to why they're soft on democracy. Why they really don't believe in democracy is because they don't have the support of the majority of the American people. Project 2025 polls very low. One poll in NBC found only 4% of Americans supported their agenda, and that is why Donald Trump during the campaign lied about it and said he had no idea what Project 2025 was. And now we find out, of course, that he very much knows about it and is bringing it up now in terms of the government shutdown. But because it's such an unpopular agenda, they use Trump as a Trojan horse. Yeah. They used his popularity and his appeal to get their agenda through. And it's also why they don't believe in democracy, because if people actually vote on what they believe in, they lose every single time. People don't want women, in the kitchen. They don't want a gun policy where you have machine guns are legalized and ghost guns are legalized. They don't want to live in a white supremacist Christian nation. Another thing they believe in they want to get rid of immigrants. Well, okay, who's going to do the labor to replace the immigrants? Their answer to this is child labor, legalizing child labor. So when you look at the individual parts that are all tied to Christian nationalism, they're deeply unpopular.
Well, we're talking right now, on Living for the City on WBAI, and I'm your host, Michael G. Haskins. We're talking about pulling the curtain back on Project 2025, a coordinated plan to reshape the federal government and redefine American life from the bottom up, from the ground up. My guest today is Wayne Besen, the Executive Director of Truth Wins Out, and he has a new 500-page report, Behind the Mask, profiling 60 of the 114 organizations driving this agenda. I want to say this over again, and I hope you don't mind, Wayne, because I want people to understand and know who you are and look this information up for themselves. It is important going forward at this moment to do just that. Wayne, I want to ask you about abortion, LGBTQ rights, and other seeming cultural flashpoints. Well, they're not seeming at all. The report highlights numerous quotations from these organizations relating to abortion. What are some of the key themes that you've observed, and how these groups frame reproductive rights, a woman's right to choose?
Well, they don't believe a woman has any right to choose, and a fetus is a baby, and that a woman should be, her reproductive rights should be dictated by the state. In fact, they are targeting abortion pills right now, something that they call in Project 2025.
And so on?
Yes. They call it Operation Rolling Thunder, and it's the right wing's first concerted attempt to target abortion pills, and they want to convince the FDA and Congress and the courts to crack down on their use. And also they're opposed to IVF as well. They said during the campaign, Trump, that he was not, but indeed they are targeting. They are targeting this. They have their own. They have their own version to replace in vitro fertilization called restorative reproductive medicine, which is sort of this quack theory that you can go. That they're. It's a quack-like alternative to IVF, where you reduce your stress and things like that. So they want to take away all access to abortion. They want to control reproductive rights, and we believe they also, one of the things they wanted to do. We believe they're going to target contraception, but they wanted to, in Project 2025, ban pornography. So they want to control. I think people need to understand they want to control every aspect of your life. Yes. They want to tell you how to live and what to do and who to be.
And so let's just move this further on LGBTQ issues. The report documents quotes from these organizations, this 500-page report that we were talking about, Behind the Mask. It talks about that these organizations deny the legitimacy of transgender identity, no matter how you feel about it, but that's what they say. The link to homosexuality and other social ills. Let's explore that a little bit for us, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, they don't want LGBTQ people to exist. And it goes back to their interpretation of the Bible. And they say the Bible said we have Adam and Eve. And so Adam and Steve cannot exist. And it really is that simple. And so they have to make a great effort to make sure LGBTQ people are silenced, whether in the closet or certainly not in the public square. And that is a defining tenet. And it's really the glue that holds disparate groups in this coalition together, whether they are business groups, anti-abortion groups, labor organizations, because Project 2025 covers all aspects of society. Groups, you wouldn't expect to be anti-LGBTQ, like business organizations. They're hideously, horribly anti-LGBTQ. And we ask the question, what do they want to do with LGBTQ people? Well, we have the answer to it. And I'll tell you how we know, because when Russia banned LGBTQ organizations and banned gay pride and criminalized, they applauded Russia. They thought this was wonderful. When Uganda passed the anti-homosexuality bill, which Rachel Maddow defined as the kill the gays bill, which is execution or prison, they applauded this. So when people ask me, what do they intend to do with gay people or transgender people? And my answers always be, whatever they can get away with. Yeah. Whatever they're able to accomplish, they will do. And people need to understand this. And I have, in our report, Behind the Mask, we have a treasure trove of quotes which are quite explicit on how they feel about gay people. They want many of these organizations were upset when the Lawrence versus Texas, which legalized same-sex intimacy. They want it illegal. They want you to be able to go to jail if you're gay and have sex. These are their beliefs. And people shouldn't sugarcoat it. They will do what they can get away with.
What they can get away with. Well, Wayne, as we approach the conclusion of our conversation today, certainly not least, there's many in these organizations portray the left, liberal elites. They are critical of race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Just take a couple of minutes, and I'm sorry for giving this short shrift, but what is this framing? How does this? How do you uncover this, and what do you see as part of your report? What was discussed, and what did you find out?
Well, one thing that really scares me is their attacks on the left. And they portray anybody who's a member of the left as a radical communist who's trying to overthrow America. Their attacks on the left are unnerving because they're agitating. They're really I think, portraying half of our population as distinctly un-American and unworthy of this country, and which goes back to their efforts to replace democracy, because they say this group on the left is so unworthy, is so un-American, so unpatriotic, so radical, they have no right to rule, and that will justify, for example, what happened on January 6th, to stay in office. What they say about the left is it's cruel, it's untrue. In many cases, it's even violent, the rhetoric, and the amount of this rhetoric. I'll give you one example. Austin Ruse, the president of the Catholic group CFAM, here's a quote from him. "The hard left, they're human-hating people that run modern universities. They should all be taken out and shot." That's one of the people in Project 2025. Here's another quote from the same guy, Austin Ruse. "Abortion lovers, radical homosexuals, sexual revolutionaries, they are coming for our children. They want our children for nefarious causes that come from the very pits of hell." Well, if you keep repeating these things,
yes,
it radicalizes certain, especially unstable members of the right, and it becomes very dangerous.
Well, Wayne Besen, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it right there for this moment. I want you to tell listeners of Living for the City how they can find this report and how they can read this. They can't maybe digest 500 pages tonight, but they certainly need to start reading this. How can folks get a hold of this report? And name it again for us, please.
Sure. So go to truthwinsout.org. That's our website, truthwinsout.org, and go to our resources section. And right up top at resources, you'll see Behind the Mask. And you don't have to read all the pages. What we did was we divided it between the organizations and also issues. And if you just click the page number, it will take you to the part you're interested in right there. So you can just go to the part you're interested in. We made it very easy for people because, most people don't have time to read all 527 pages, but they might be interested in their gun policy or white supremacy or how they're treating women or LGBTQ, and we can take them right there to both the organizations and the quotes. So we made it very easy for people to digest.
Excellent. Well done. Very, very astute doing it that way. Executive Director of Truth Wins Out, Wayne Besen. Thank you so much for being on the program today and helping us understand a little bit further into not just Project 2025, but inside this coordinated plan to reshape the government. Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Love the show, and it's always an honor to be on.
Thank you so much. This is listener-sponsored, commercial-free radio WBAI in New York at 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web. We'll be back with my next guests in just a moment.